Hello everyone. So I have been using Doom Emacs since a while now. And to be honest, some days I absolutely love Doom. Like I think it's one of the best frameworks out there for Emacs. But on some other days I loathe it, right? I don't like using it. I go down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out how Doom is doing things and how I should be doing things. So since the last year or so, I've actually switched to using Corgi most of the time. Corgi is an Emacs configuration layer specifically for Clojure developers. It's not exactly a framework like Doom is. It's basically a bunch of packages, and then you can choose which packages you want. And most of these packages are like really small, right? Like they're not more than 100 lines or so, and they're very easy to read, understand what's going on behind the scenes. Basically, Corgi came out of Arna's own configuration. He just took his configuration apart and created Corgi out of it, which is amazing because I really like his configuration. And yeah, so now I'm actually going to set up my Emacs configuration from scratch again using Corgi. And Corgi does use evil mode, so it's not for people who don't like Vim modal editing. So that's one catch here, but I love it, so not an issue for me. Corgi is also heavily inspired from both Spacemacs and Doom, so any Spacemacs user should feel right at home. Okay, so let's start with this and open up the terminal. And the first thing we want to do is let's clone Corgi. If you already have an Emacs configuration, make sure to remove that. So I have a symlinked configuration, so let's remove that. So there's a sample configuration provided with Corgi, which we are going to use to bootstrap our personal configuration. So let's move this sample configuration and let's call this emacs.d.corgi2. Let's say it. And let's go and create a symlink for this. So now we have this. Let me also initialize a git repo and basically add everything in here because we'll be making a lot of changes. So first blood, let's do this. And okay, so let's launch up Emacs. Let's see how it looks. So the first time you open Emacs, you'll be seeing these building messages here. It's basically building all the packages. Okay, so now I am in the scratch buffer by default. So there are a couple of changes I want to do in here. The first thing is I want to open up the init file of Emacs. So I could go to that file directly. But there's a shortcut in here which is space FE, and then there's a bunch of other shortcuts here, which the one which we need is I. So space FEI is going to open up init.el. Once we're in here, let's search for font and let's change the font first. Keep that, but let's increase the size to 18. And I used comma EE to evaluate this in elisp. So 18 does look nice, but let's go with 20 here. Okay, sweet. So our font is changed now. Let's save this. I don't like using desktop mode, and so let's just disable these for now. So one thing I'm noticing here is that control U isn't working. It's going as a prefix argument instead of the default Vim command, which is control U for going up a page. So control D works. That's nice, but control U isn't. So let's fix that first. The way we do that is by providing a variable to eval. So to understand what Corgi is doing, Corgi is first loading up this bootstrap file. So we can actually see what it does. It basically installs the straight use package and some other adds main Corgi package to the repository. Now that that is loaded, we are going to load some of these Corgi packages. But before we do any of that, create this variable setQ eval want control U scroll. Let's make that as true. Let's evaluate this. It's not going to work now. We actually have to restart Emacs. So let's do that quickly. Okay, let's open up init file again, and control D and control U works fine. So that's awesome. So the next part here is to try and open up a clojure project and see how it goes. Um, so let's do that. Let's open up the terminal, do a touch steps.eden, and let's open that. So I have this alias e here, which is emacs client n, which opens up any file in my emacs GUI. This is possible because we have this server start here. So emacs kind of launches a server and looks for these client connections to open up. One change I really need is that I use backspace in the normal mode to switch back to my buffer, the previous buffer. So the default bindings here for Corgi are space tab. But I don't want that. I want backspace to do it. So let's fix that first. In Corgi, we have some files. One is a user configuration file for keys, and the other is your custom key configurations. So let's look at those first. Let's look at our custom configuration here. Inside our custom configuration, we have these bindings available, and the default one is global, which will work in any of the eval states. Or we could specify something like, only normal, or maybe only visual, or things like that. So by default, we do have some configurations here so that it's easy to understand how it works. But let's add our configuration of the backspace first. So I want backspace to only work in normal and visual, so I'll add it here. So let's do that. So as soon as I've added that and saved my file, Corgi is going to pick up these changes automatically, and now I can hit backspace to go back to my previous buffers. So that's cool. Another thing I immediately do, okay, so before we do that, right, you can see here that these are just simple ls commands here. The benefit here is that all of your configuration, like custom key configurations, are in a single file. And if you want to see the default file, default commands which are set by Corgi, you can also do space fe and capital K. So this is going to give the Corgis built-in key bindings. I would definitely recommend you to go and just scroll through these, like how it works and whatnot. These are really sensible defaults. I really like how Arna has configured all of these, and they make a lot of sense, right? Okay, let's go back and let's fix the next thing, which is really irritating me and is very personal to my configuration, is that when I hit the semicolon button, right? So semicolon is for repeating your search. So if I do FD, or let's say maybe if I do FE and then I hit semicolon, it's going to go to the next find in Vim. I never use this feature, so I don't really care about it. But what I do want is that the colon, not the semicolon, which is shift and hitting the button. I want that to be the default behavior. So let's swap those. Okay, to swap this colon and semicolon, let's first see what their default bindings are. So we are going to use space HD and then K, which is help describe key, and then I'm going to hit semicolon. And here we can see that it says it runs the command eval x, which is found in eval motion state map. Okay, so that's cool. So basically what is happening here is that it's running the command eval x in motion state map. So that's something which we know. And now let's again do space hdk and hit semicolon. So it says that it's running the command eval repeat find character, which is also found in motion state map. So that's convenient. So let's do that as well. So let's first swap colon semicolon with colon. So let's do that. You can just give any description, and let's hit the command eval repeat find car over here, and let's do the same thing for eval x, which is, so once we have done this in the motion map, let's save this, and now let's try to hit semicolon, and bam, that works as a colon. So we've swapped these, which I really need for my muscle memory, so that's cool. Now that this part is done, let's open up a clojure project. Okay. So to switch to a project, we can use the shortcut space PP, which is projectile switch project. And I've already added a test clojure project in here. So let's open that up. So I've got a basic deps.eden. Now I'm going to hit space F to open up the find file, and let's create a source /core.clj. Once I have this in here, let's try to create a function, and now let's try to jack in. So I'm going to hit meta x again, and we can see that there is a cider jack in CLJ. So let's do that. This is going to launch an end repl. A closure and repl. So we are inside the repl now. So now you can see that I have these two windows in here and I've been switching between them. So how am I doing that? I'm doing that using space W, and there's all of these window commands, but I want go to other window. So it's space WO, and that's how I can move between windows. There is also two handy shortcuts, which is space W1, which which uses the current window and maximizes that. Or there is another command called space W2, which splits your configuration in two different windows. So let's do that. So now that we have the REPL, let's evaluate this buffer, which is comma EB. Comma is the local leader here. So this has been evaluated. And now let's create a comment and let's try to run this. The first step here is that when we hit add, we can see that there is already some auto completion here. You can move between this using Control N and Control P. So let's do A, B, and now we are going to hit comma ED, comma EE, and that's going to evaluate to 3. Now there are some special evaluation parameters here, which is comma EP to evaluate inside a preview buffer on the right. Or you can also do comma E capital P, which is kind of going to print it as a comment. So these are the most handy features which I use. So now we have this REPL running, right? So we can kind of do things here as well if we want to. So if you see, I'm somewhere in here and let's say I want to change this entire thing. So since Clojure is basically just forms, everything is a form in Clojure. There's a special text object in Clojure, which is the form. So you can just do CIF to change inside the form. This works everywhere. So I can do a CIF here, I can do a CIF here, everything. It works in every single bracket. It also actually works in strings. So you can do something like this and then hit CIF. So that's one of the most common text objects I use. Okay, so now the auto completion didn't work. That's because our cider REPL, our connection has not evaluated this namespace yet. So let's go in here and comma EE again to evaluate this. And let's try this again. So string slash, and we can see all of these, right? So let's hit replace. And when I hover over it, you can see in the bottom, I can also see the keywords which it's expecting. Or I can hit Shift K to see the entire documentation for this particular function, which is super handy. I can also kind of go in here, hit enter and see the other functions, the related ones. For example, replace first, things like that. To go out, I'm using Control O to go back. That's the Vim commands. So let's get rid of this window, which was space WD. Okay, so now let's say I actually fix this bug in here. And now you can see that to change these, right, to change this form, let's say I want to delete everything from 1 all the way till 2, but until the bracket. So I could probably do something like CT and round brackets, or I could probably do like, so by hitting capital L, you're kind of going through the forms. So I can kind of do D to capital L. So that's going to remove two of these forms. But I don't like using this manual method kind of doing things. So I use this one really important package called as eval clever params. So let's open that up and see. So what this package will do is that it's going to make all Vim text objects aware of forms. So instead of working on lines, everything will start working on forms. So let's do that. Let's hit space FEI again. Let's add clever params. Okay, so Corgi does install eval clever params by default, but it doesn't really enable it in the hopes that people can choose how they want to configure it. So I have my specific configuration for eval clever params, which I'm going to paste in here now. And this is one of the most important ones here, which is a tab. So what I do is I've configured tab to eval jump item in the clever params mode. So now if you see I hit tab, nothing happens in the normal mode, right? That's such a waste because tab is an easy to hit button. Okay, now that I'm in here, let me hit tab, and as you see it goes to the next closing and closing bracket in the form. So if I'm somewhere in here and I hit tab, it's going to go to the closing bracket for that form. So this is really helpful to me. For example, I'm somewhere in here, I hit tab, and then I'm at the end, and then I can add another form here. Or maybe I just want to go to the top. I think this is one of my most used clojure bindings to just move around very easily, right? What clever params is going to do now is that I'm at 1 and now I can hit shift capital C. So in default Vim bindings, that's going to remove everything till the end of the line, but in clever params it's going to remove everything till the end of the form. So when I do shift C, it's only going to remove 1 and 2. So now I can fix this bug in here. When I hit shift D, it's going to remove everything from till the end of the line. But if I do shift D in here, it's going to remove till the end of the form. I can go to the start of the line and hit shift D to remove the entire form. There are a lot of different, there are some more examples in clever params, which you can read in the docs, or I can go through them in the next video. So that's basically my closure workflow. But this is just a base to introduce what Corgi can really do, just to get you started. But there's a lot of different configuration which I have done, and a lot of things which Corgi also provides, which I will explore in the next video. Thanks.